And I said, y'all need to really start paying attention to this. You're not going to be Emeril Lagasse in 2 semesters. You have to learn the basics. You have to learn techniques. You have to learn how to boil, steam, and braise something or poach it.
On this episode of Smidgen, we talked to Chef Marcelle Bienvenu about the connection of food and culture and how one can't happen without the other. I'm Anne Milnick, the former and very lucky student of Chef Marcelle and owner of Red Stick Spice Company. I call myself the tireless champion of home cooks everywhere. After we talk to Chef Marcelle, we're heading into the Red Stick Spice Teaching Kitchen with store staffer Sarah, where I pull out my grandma's cast iron and cook up Chef Marcelle's very Cajun corn Creole. This is Smidgen.
You're listening to Smidgen, the Red Stick Spice Company podcast located directly between a dash and a pinch, where it's all about the tips, tricks, and tools to make home cooking easy and doable. We did our research and it's proven. Mealtime's where it's at. And now your host, Anne Milnick.
Chef Marcelle Bienvenu is an instructor at the Chef John Folse Culinary Institute at Nicholls State University. Her professional experience includes Commander's Palace in New Orleans, Brennan's of Houston, working with Chef Paul Prudhomme and Chef Emeril Lagasse. Additionally, Chef Marcelle wrote the Cooking Creole column for the Times-Picayune for 32 years. Nominated for the James Beard Award for American Cookbooks, and was also inducted into the Acadian Museum of Living Legends. And she's one of my favorite teachers ever. So welcome, Chef. How are you?
Welcome. Thank you. Lovely here.
Good deal. So we are going to chat today. I'm excited to do this. For listeners, I went to the Chef John Folse Culinary Institute, graduated in 2010, and in my senior year, we were all gathered together and told that they had been working on this new instructor who was coming in, and it was a female and she was a food writer, and we were going to be just very, very excited about it. And they announced you and you came in, and I was the one person in the group, because I went to school as a 40-year-old among 19 and 20-year-olds. I was the only person applauding, and I was delighted to be there with you because I grew up in Laplace, so we got the Times-Picayune, and Thursdays there was a fight between me and my sister over who read the food section first. And I was actually recently going through my mom's recipes. She typed up recipes on 3x5 cards on a typewriter, and we're organizing them and going to print a family cookbook. But she also saved clippings, and so lots and lots of your column was in there, clippings that she would pin on a bulletin board. It was the Pinterest of the day, saving your column. So it was very, very special to me to learn from you at Nichols. And I was so excited when you came to work there. And so now you've been there, 10 years now?
10 years, yeah.
And one of my fondest memories of your classes, and you teach lots of fundamental classes there, but you also taught me how to write a recipe. And that was huge for me. And something I learned about you is I knew you wrote the food column, and I knew you edited cookbooks and you had your own cookbooks, but I didn't realize your start was in journalism, and that your start in journalism wasn't necessarily in food, and that you have a long legacy of journalists in your family.
Right. My family owned the Test News, which was established in 1886 by my grandfather. And it's still in operation today. And so after Papa Isaiah died, my father took it over, and then my brother did in the clay, and now he just retired. So It's been in the family. We grew up with the printing presses and all that.
You got your first job in journalism with the Picayune?
Yes. My father said, well, just go ask him for a job. And I said, well, Dad, I just can't walk in there. And he said, well, just go ahead. Well, at the time, I was married to this guy that we don't talk about too much, but his name was N.O. Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T.
Gotcha.
So my name was Marcelle B. Wright. Well, it turned out to be very wrong. But I went there, and I didn't use Bienvenu. I used my married name. And after about 3 months, Mr. Healy, who was the editor, called me, and he said, Marcelle, what's your last name? I said, Bienvenu. He said, well, I wrote out the 1927 flood with your father on the roof of a building in St. Martinville. I said, I know, we have that picture. And so he said, well, change your name. I said, not only that, I'm going to change husband. He made me use Bienvenu. So we kept in touch even after I left the Picayune the first time. And then in 1984, Ella Brennan, who had become a mentor to me, said, well, why don't you just write for the Times-Picayune? I'll just call them up and say you want to write now. I said, oh, okay. And she did.
You did go straight into food writing at that point?
In 1972, I was working at the Picayune, and the Time Life book people were starting their Foods of the World series. And they had come to the Times-Picayune, and they got their writer's deadline. And the city editor said, Marcelle, would you take these people for coffee? They're from Time Life. They want something. So I went and took them for coffee. And one of the people there was Brasher, and her father at the time was, I think, the dean of men at LSU. So we became good friends. And at the age of 23 or 24, I convinced her that I knew everything there was to know about Louisiana food. And she hired me as a research director. And that was when I really realized that I was living in a place that food was just different from any place else. And I was very curious about the history. Why did we eat gumbo? Why did we have jambalaya? And my father was an old Boy Scout leader, and he took me everywhere. I mean, I learned to cook at his elbow. He was one of those that don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So I kind of followed him around, and he loved cooking outdoors. And so when I went to work for Time Life, and I finished that, then Ella Brennan and I became big buddies. And I went to work there in the 70s, and that's how it all happened.
So the food column, the food issue, it's a food section. It was the Thursday food section. That's how I remember it growing up. That started in the 80s?
In 84. I had just closed my restaurant in Lafayette.
Okay.
So I went back to New Orleans looking for a job, and Ella said, I'm going to call the Times-Picayune, you can start writing for them. And she kind of really finagled that. And when I went for an interview, I said, I always write in the first person. So he said, that's fine. You tell stories about your family. And that's really how it started.
Well, and they say marketing is storytelling. We were talking about that the other day. You wrote your final column in 2016, correct?
Yes, Christmas of 60, yeah.
So talk a little bit about the evolution of the changes to that column and section from 84 to 2016. In terms of the food, think about what you were writing then versus the last column.
The thing, too, that I started realizing was in the 70s, when Paul Prudhomme first appeared on the culinary scene in New Orleans, I think everybody just went, whoa. And he was such a dynamic, creative person that I thought it was just absolutely incredible to watch him do an interpretation of what Cajun food was. You know, my idea of Cajun food was rice and gravy, baked sweet potatoes, smothered everything, wild ducks brought by daddy, and fish from the basin. And he had these incredibly creative things that, he made a pirogue out of an eggplant or a mirliton.
I remember that.
Deep fry it. Then he filled the little pirogue with fried oysters and fried shrimp, and then put a hollandaise sauce flavored with tasso. And I went, well, I didn't have that at my mama's house. Nobody even knew what tasso was at that time, or boudin, or andouille. A lot of people outside South Louisiana had no idea what that was. When I saw him go to work for Ella, I said, Ella, nobody's going to eat Cajun food. I said, there's hardly any place at that time that you could get a chicken and sausage gumbo in the city. And I said, the little Cajuns cook their gumbo with chicken on the bone. Oh, she said, well, don't worry about that. We'll just take it off the bone. That was so simple. And it was really interesting to see she and Paul marry the two together. And it became almost kind of another cuisine. It was a really drastic change from seeing country food changing to things that people in the city would eat. And that was an evolutionary time. I mean, up until the 50s and late 60s, everybody was eating American food. I mean, generally. And then everybody thought, oh, well, look, Paul Prudhomme has his Cajun food. And it was. Everybody went crazy. He introduced all these flavors. And at first, everybody went, well, he just puts pepper on it. But it was much more intricate than that. So when I started writing in 84, that wave had kind of really hit, especially in New Orleans. A lot of the chefs were becoming very cutting edge. They were changing to using food from the farmers. Paul would have I think every Wednesday they did a little bit of pig to the restaurant. They'd take it apart and cook it to do all kinds of things. So it was kind of interesting to see people change what they were looking for. Also, New Orleans has a great respect for the culture. I could kind of jump back and forth writing about old traditional stuff. Like I remember the first 3 or 4 recipes columns, I went, Mom, I said, well, tell them how to make griots and grits. Or let's tell them how to make chicken au gros oignons, which was chicken smothered with onions. So I kind of started using things in my family that we ate. But of course, then I started being in the city long more, and I was watching what was going on. So it just kind of changed. It just kind of grew with what was popular and what was coming into being very popular in the South. And I still think some people do not understand South Louisiana food. I still think they think that if you put pepper on it, it's Cajun.
Oh, I 100% agree.
And when I see Cajun French fries, well, okay, it has cayenne pepper on it, I guess. A Cajun pizza. Why would we want to make something Italian Cajun? And what would make it Cajun? Everybody trying to climb on this Cajun boat and having people try to understand what it was.
And I think it's either sort of cartoonish and like a sitcom, everything's Cajun or the mashup of Cajun Creole, but I get a lot of people who think that Cajun food is sort of lowbrow and peasant food, and Creole food is more city food and more sophisticated. And when you really start to look at it and read about the culture, Cajun food is a very complex cuisine.
It does have its French base. That's who settled in the south of Louisiana. The French were here first. Well, the American Indians were here first, but they also contributed to what eventually we became knowing what was in these dishes. So it's very, the Italians, the Germans, the French, the African Americans, everybody had their hand in the pot.
Exactly.
And when Emeril said he wanted to do a book on just Louisiana, I went, okay. So we came out with this Louisiana Real and Rustic. And he and my mama would talk for hours. And he'd say, where's that Cajun or Creole? She says, I don't know. I think it's just what we, it all depends on who's cooking it, who is stirring the pot. And Emeril was very good about that first book. Well, that was not really his first book, but the second book, Louisiana Real and Rustic. He said, she was very, very adamant about learning and trying to keep the Acadian cuisine kind of true. Mm-hmm. We roamed all over South Louisiana. We got on shrimp boats. We got on oyster boats. We went duck hunting. We talked to people on the side of the road who was fishing. He was just very good about doing all this. So I said, you're not doing anything fancy. This is home cooking. And he tapped it very well. I mean, and that's what really kind of started his live show.
What I think is really interesting about your, how many books?
I've written 4 books. I've worked on 7 of his books, and I've worked on some with McElhaney. So it's a total of 17 books I've worked. And then The Cooking of the Storm, which was the one that we did after Katrina, that I did with the Times Picayune, that was nominated for the James Beard Award, which I think was one of the brilliant ideas for a book after the storm.
Oh, without a doubt. And I want to get to that. But it's interesting to me because you have a list of cookbooks that you've written, but you also have a list of historical texts, basically. Stir the Pot was my text for the class I took with you at Nichols. Talk about what would be your big teachable takeaway from writing a cookbook versus, say, writing one of these texts.
Well, the 2 Dr. Brassos that I worked with on Stir the Pot, the father, Dr. Brasso, had worked with the Louisiana Studies. I'm never going to get it right. But anyway, he had access to a great wealth of Louisiana history at which was USL then. And that started this Louisiana historic, whatever it is. And when I started working with him, I was flabbergasted about all the history that pertained to the cuisine. And that's what really had ignited me. I'd worked in Washington, D.C. in the 60s. And I called home after a week. I said, Mom, I have to come home. They don't have gumbo here. And she said, oh, well, it's going to be okay. Call your congressman. He'll get some shrimp sent up to y'all. Anyway, when I realized people didn't eat like we did, I never thought of how I'm going to go find out why they did. So when I was working with the Brassos, we really got into how things started to develop when the Acadians got here from Canada. And I'm sure they went and went, where are we? The climate was different. They had to make do with ingredients they had never seen before. And again, it was kind of a trading back and forth with American Indians, with the French that were here. They got here in the 1750s. By the late 1700s, we had the French Revolution, which brought a whole other wave of French aristocrats. Also in the late 1700s was when they had the slave uprising in the Caribbean. So there was another influx of something that was going to also contribute to the evolution of what eventually became what we know now. It was mind-boggling to me.
We can't get away from this interview without, and I know you've been asked this a ton of times, but I know I get asked it often, and I know listeners are going to want to know. Tell us what your definition of the difference. What is the difference between Cajun food versus Creole food?
It's the difference between rustic Cajun to very sophisticated. Let me just give you an example. Madame X, Madame X, who lives in the French Quarter in New Orleans, and she's having a very nice dinner party. She and her cook go to the market. They get all the fresh ingredients. She has set a beautiful table with china and crystal. You know, the table is set beautifully. They have a 5 or 6 course dinner, and it's all very elegant and very, very French, with some Spanish in it. When you go to the country, Madame Y is standing at her back porch, and whatever flies, crawls, or comes across her backyard is what's going in the pot. And, you know, it may be 20 people coming to eat because the cousins are coming next door. Or on Sundays, my mother would say, oh, I have to make a long gravy. Nana just stopped by and cousin so you have to kind of stretch. So everything was in a big pot. The only common thing that was always on the stove every day of my life was a pot of rice.
Same here.
Whether you needed it or not, it was there.
Yeah, one of the first things I learned how to cook.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and if they had leftovers, they made it into pudding. It was like leftover bread made into French bread. So it was a very rustic, very, very casual kind of food. It was whoever, you know, whatever your husband brought back from the hunt, whatever they caught fishing, whatever you could grow in your backyard. So, you know, that was when food farm to table was at its best.
Right. And now it's a trendy thing we all talk about doing like it's new, and it's just how they lived.
And I will say this, just one more thing, because I had a student ask me about that today. He said, you know, Chef, the desserts weren't real fancy. I told him they didn't have any fancy or exotic ingredients. They had chickens, so they had eggs. We had cows, so we had milk. We had sugarcane farmers, so we had sugar. You know, so it was, you know, you had bread pudding. You had gâteau filo, carrot cake. You had les oreilles de cochon, the little pig's ears that made out of pastry. And there's all very simple little things because that's all they had. You know, we didn't have chocolate and all that. You know, so it was very humble ingredients.
Everything we've been talking about, and definitely everything you've written about, is all in an effort to connect the cuisine with the culture.
Yes, and you know, I tell these students, and I teach them that culinary history of the South, I want them to realize that their background, their culture, their family ties, I've really impressed upon them to try to keep that preserved. You know, someone told me the other day, said, oh, I don't make jambalaya unless I have a box of it. And I said, but you know, you're missing the whole point, because some of these dishes like gumbo and jambalaya takes a couple hours to fix. You have to chop, and you know, sometimes you have to go catch your shrimp or whatever, and or make your own sausage. And I said, you're missing the point of the family and friends being together in the kitchen and sharing the preparation of this food. And that's how our culture and our foodways continue to live. Because if everybody made something out of a box, what's fun about that?
Exactly. And so that all goes to that preservation. This is a perfect time to talk about, I really want to talk about after the storm, because that was really, really an effort in preservation at a time when we didn't know what was going to happen. There were so many questions. I had family members who were displaced. And I remember when that came out, that was such a treat for my family to all go out and buy a copy of that book. So tell me how you and Judy made that come together.
When we started finally getting back to the city, we started having all these letters, or people would drop off notes at the Times-Picayune saying, I can't buy, you know, everything had been, the cookbooks floated away, the recipe boxes floated away. And the first thing people wanted to know in New Orleans was, I'm hungry and I want my comfort food. Mm-hmm. And I want Tottenham recipes for stuffed mirliton. And what happened then was that Judy really was great about it. If I had a recipe you wanted, she would hook you up with the person that you wanted the recipe from. So we started this big connection. Exchange Alley is what she called it. You know, she started a new column. So I remember this man came, he had a whole box of recipes. He said, these were in my attic, so they didn't get, so he just dumped them off us. And we just started this big thing about trying to get people, and what we first realized is a lot of people were looking for the old recipes, or recipes from restaurants that were no longer there, that had gone away. So and then, of course, the younger people wanted stuff that they knew about. So it was a really incredible project to get the balance of the recipes that we thought should be included. And we had access to the Louisiana Library. They have a huge database. I mean, you could literally put in Oysters Rockefeller, and you'd come up with 10 recipes, and anything that was in the major papers in Louisiana. So we had to kind of hunt and find one that was real, like, this was easy, but we want the recipe from the Roosevelt for the milk punches or whatever, or the gin fizzes. And, it was all in the Picayune. And thank God that their library had survived without much damage. So we were able to go down and find original recipes that were in the paper. And it was really, it was a great community effort. And, people were really, I think the first rooms people wanted in their house was their kitchen.
Oh, no doubt.
They don't need a bathroom, but they needed a kitchen.
Well, and one of the first things we wanted to do was just gather for a meal. It's what you do in a time of crisis like that.
And, I think Judy and I were on PBS or whatever. I can't remember the interview. She says, why do you think people are so interested? I said, well, that's their comfort. People in Louisiana live by their food tradition. I said, if this happened in Utah, nobody would have called and said, can you give me Aunt Nana's recipe for the stuffed Merotong? I'm not making fun of people in Utah. I don't know what they eat, but I don't think they have the association with food being such comfort. And I think that, when the book came out, I mean, the first day that they came out, we had 6,000 pre-orders. And Judy and I signed each one of those books. It took us 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Our hands were swelling up from writing. And it was just such an outpouring of people that appreciated the fact that we had gathered all this stuff together, and they could, kind of put away their poor cookbooks that had been drenched and full of mold.
Exactly.
So they had something to fall back on.
In that way, you did the preservation for them.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about your 10 years in academia since you've been at Nichols, because it was such a huge part for me that you were one of my teachers. And one of the things you teach, which is something that is so important to me, is writing. And talk a little bit about how you approach writing with the students, because I wonder if a lot of them initially make the connection with, I'm going to go be a chef, but I should also be a good writer.
Well, I've been teaching that culinary history of the South since I started there. And I do it online. So, and it's not just a culinary class. It can be humanities, I believe, and history. So I have football players, and I have biologists, and I have culinary students, and I have nursing students. And the great thing about it is they can't see me, and I can't see them. So I think they go, oh, nobody knows who I am. And we have these great weekly discussions. And they have to write these discussions on Moodle. And one of the research papers I still make them do, which I think kind of really brings them to kind of a reality, is I tell them to go find an old person and find out their family's food ways and their culture back maybe in the 50s, or maybe they have somebody in the 40s and 50s, and how things have changed from then to now. I mean, one little girl came there, they cried, and said, I never asked my grandma about anything. And the other day I sat with her and talked about when she was a little girl. And that's our history. That's our culture. I remember I had one student who came to the office and said, I don't know any old people. I'm from Mississippi, and I don't know nothing. So I said, well, you know what, Zach? We're going to go to the nursing home. And I called the nursing home. We're going to find you a pal. We did. And this girl, I forget his name. And you can interview him, and you can say, like, that's your grandfather, or whatever. And for 2 years, Zach went every Friday to visit that gentleman in the nursing home. He was fascinated by hearing these guys talk about how they used to, milk cows, make ice cream, make their own butter. And I make some of my students make butter the first day of class with the cream. And they go, what is this? It's butter. Because I don't think they ever saw anybody make butter.
That's funny.
And, so I make them write about chefs that have tried to preserve our Southern heritage. It doesn't have to be from Louisiana. But, I think the cuisine of the South is a very humble cuisine. I mean, I remember when I was writing some things for Emeril, and one time I sent up a recipe to New York City with grits. And the little editor called and said, oh, ma'am, we don't write any recipes with grits. That's only for poor people. And I went, oh, what? Now, I bet you no chef worth his salt does not have a recipe with, an item on his menu without grits.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, so it's very interesting to see how that evolution kind of just starts revolving around. Ella Brennan used to say, we may evolve, we may grow, but we'll always go back to choose to say, what's wrong with a wonderful stuffed flounder? And now we can't find it on any menus. And that was on everybody's menu. And it's not that I don't want our cuisine to grow and become, love creativity, but I don't want them to stray too far from what is real and what's tradition. And my students, some of them can't write, but they like to tell stories. And that's the whole thing about writing. You're telling a story. And I started developing a culinary journalism class with the mass media people on campus. And that's also becoming one of my fun classes. We learn how to blog, we learn how to write recipes, we learn how to take pictures of food, we learn how to do restaurant reviews. Because if you go to any kind of food-oriented website, somebody's out there cooking and taking the pictures and all that. And I have 2 or 3 students that are now working in Birmingham it's now the mecca for food magazines. So there is a career path in that these days.
Without a doubt. My social media manager said I could write a recipe a day and put it on our website and it wouldn't be enough. The consumption of content is just voracious. It's just really, really fast. And so being able to put out good, solid content, a lot of it gets repetitive, but the bottom line is that's just how we consume now. So being able to put out good, solid content quickly is really, really important. I'm a perfectionist, so I'm editing for 2 and 3 days. And she's like, well, we got to get it out there. Just feel confident in your writing. So I think it's great what you're doing because it is such a big part of the food world now.
It is. And I like to think that all of our students that come through Nichols, that we find a place for them. I had a student, and after the 3rd block, I said, honey, you don't like to cook? She said, well, I like to cook, but I don't like to be in the kitchen all the time. I said, well, what are you going to do? She said, I don't know. But she wrote a paper for me that was hysterical. It was the cutest, funnest thing about she and her sister who had to come home by themselves when they were like 5th or 6th grade. And they were always hungry, so they would fix something. And, sometimes one time they almost set the place on fire, but they started to learn to cook. And she wrote beautifully. And now she's writing for the blog in Atlanta. I think they have in Atlanta. There's one in Birmingham. There's one in Savannah. And she's having a ball. And she doesn't have to stay in the kitchen all day long cooking. I knew that she liked food, but she didn't want to have to cook it in a restaurant. Or, she wanted something else. And I knew there's got to be a place for her.
I love that. This is a perfect spot to talk about Nichols and what you guys do there. Of course, I'm a fan. I'm an alum. I'm a fan. I do have a lot of parents come to me and have a graduating senior who wants to go to culinary school, and they look at schools across the country and ask me my opinion. And of course, I always sing the praises of Nichols. But I'd love to get from your point of view what you think sets Nichols apart in terms of, a parent looking at a culinary program for their teenager or someone out there looking to change careers. What do you think sets it apart?
Well, I think that the Chef John Folse, I think that it's such a well-balanced program. And of course, too, some of the students would just get an associate degree, which is fine. But a lot of them that take the 4 year and get their Bachelor of Science, they're way ahead of the game when it comes to getting jobs after graduation. And I wrote a little thing for incoming students, 101 jobs you can get with a culinary degree. And everybody went, oh, you're really pulling it. I said, I'm telling you, there's that many jobs out there. And I think that with the bistro program, Chef Caston, Chef JP, Chef Amelie, these kids get to work front of the house, back of the house. And you probably would agree with me. Some of these kids, I'm not working front of the house. I'm not carrying a tray. I'm not talking to people. Well, half of them change their mind. They go, I'm not working in the kitchen. I'm staying in the trunk.
Yep.
Or vice versa. So they get a really good exposure to real life. They have to play in the menus. They have to do a requisition. They have to give positions in the kitchen. And, we're sold out every semester for that bistro. I mean, I can't even get in sometimes. I have to eat in the kitchen. But, then we have the baking. We have a new baking. Well, she's not new, she's out there too. Our baking classes are absolutely world class. And we have a gentleman, a chef from, he's really from Arkansas, but I think he came to us from near Atlanta. And he does our garde manger. I mean, they make sandwiches. Sausages. They've been making all kinds of pâtés and canning, and he has made them just go off the wall. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. And, they had to have soup, stocks, and sauces. And now we have concentrations, After their second core classes, we try to point them in a direction that they would like to do. And some of them encourage them to do externships. And, some of them come back, Chef, I don't want to be in the catering business. But suppose you forgot the ketchup, and you're in the middle of the levee during a party for 100 people. So if they're exposed to all that, they can make better judgment, what they should do. We try to teach them to all be managers, to learn how to work with people. They take a lot of business classes. They take dietetics. They take nutrition. So, they can do anything.
Coupled with all of that is the focus on Cajun Creole cuisine. I don't think any other culinary school approaches their regional cuisine the way that Nichols does.
We have so much to offer in that. When you think about it, there's certainly different kind of cuisines all over the United States and the world. And I think what people recognize, they're like, we are now getting students from away. And we had 2 students from North Carolina, and one of them said, I'm not leaving. She said, y'all have way too much fun here. And she said, I would never have thought of food being so much part of the culture. And I mean, food is part of the culture in many areas. But I think they see so much joy and so much attention to our food. It's so inspiring, I guess. I can't think of another word. And we have another one that just came from Virginia. And the other day she said, Chef, is down the bayou a town? I said, why? She said, well, you ask people where they're from. They go, from down the bayou. And I don't know, everybody and your listeners will probably know what that is. But she just thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
So, even in little parts of South Louisiana, there's different food culture. When I worked at Oak Alley Plantation and found out that people had fried catfish and white beans and rice on Fridays, I went, what are they doing? And one of the cooks said, well, Miss Marcelle, what do you eat with your fried fish? I said, we have potato salad. Well, so even these little pockets of and it really kind of depends on who settled that area. It might have been the German, it might have been the Italian. It's just fascinating to me. Like if you ask somebody down the bayou what they had when they were little, they go, we need spaghetti. I'm like, what's that? And I'm sure that came about during the Depression or during World War II. We had food rations. So they just had to make do with what they had. So they made weenie spaghetti.
Oh, absolutely. And I say you can go 10 miles and the roux is a completely different color.
Absolutely.
You're in 2 different worlds in terms of roux.
I did a research program with 10 students 2 years ago on roux. And, I thought there was only one way to make roux. It was like my mother taught me, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the only way.
Exactly.
And then I found out, there's always, you can put more oil, you can put more flour, you can have different colors. And we found that the further west you go of Lafayette, the darker the roux. And I think that's because of the German influence along the plains, the prairies. And Mommy used to say you have to have a lighter roux, seafood.
Right.
So having these 10 students at grade, well, I kind of wanted to know where they were from. Anybody north of Alexandria, I'm like, this is going to be good. That's the shade part. But, it was very interesting to see them talk about the roux in their family and what they made with it. It's very curious, yeah.
I teach cooking classes and it's home cooks. And it's fascinating to me that folks get to a certain station in life and they come in a class and I teach them something that I feel is very basic and it's like I split the atom. And I wonder, what have you been doing all these years? And you guys, you teach the fundamentals as well. So thinking about the home cook, what would be sort of your go-to fundamentals that a home cook should have under their belt?
This is a question because now I'm a great aunt. And I've seen my nieces and some of my nephews, they dust their pots. I said, do y'all know how to turn on the fire of the stove? Y'all have this $4,000 million stuff. And I think that some of these younger people have never sat around on a Sunday afternoon with their grandparents and aunts and uncles. So they're kind of afraid of it. So they really, and we have so much stuff now in boxes and pre this and pre that. I always tell my 101, if you can make chicken salad and you can bake a chicken, and if you can make just a simple, it can be a broth or stock-based soup. Chef Randy always says that. And learn how to do 2 or 3 different kinds of potato dishes or rice dishes. But even now we have instant rice or something. I'm just, right now I'm at a loss. But I think that basically people that really like to cook, like I have a sister who shouldn't cook. I mean, There's no way in hell she can cook. I mean, she doesn't like it. And I think that some of these things have just not been around families that cook. It really makes me sad that they don't have that family connection, watching their parents cook or grandparents.
Anthony Bourdain equated being able to cook, even if it was just a handful of meals, to learning how to tie your shoes or getting potty trained. It should be that basic of a requirement of life to be able to know how to cook a couple of meals from scratch and maybe even invite some folks over and feed them too. And I get that a lot, that folks just are, I do something that I think is very basic and they are just minds blown over the basics.
And Anne, we have access to the most incredible assortment of vegetables. I guess I'm really old. When I was little, we only had one kind of lettuce, iceberg. We have so many choices. I found two of my students the other day in front of a big display of boxed jambalaya. And one of them said, "Oh, Lord, don't come, Chef. We're not going to buy any. We're not going to buy it. We promise we're not buying it. You better not." I said, "You can make better jambalaya with simple recipe. It doesn't have to be the 2-hour jambalaya. I can give you a recipe that you can make jambalaya in 30 minutes. And they went, "Oh, wow." I said, "Okay." And I said, y'all need to really start paying attention to this. You're not going to be Emeril Lagasse in 2 semesters. You have to learn the basics. You have to learn techniques. You have to learn how to boil, steam, and braise something or poach it. And, they had me and Chef Randy at the same semester. He's doing all the proteins, and I'm doing all the fruits and vegetables and dairy products. So that gives them in fact, now when I see them in the second and third block, I see they finally got it. It's not that they don't have the passion. They just have not been exposed.
Right. They're not exposed to it. It's not something that took place on a day-to-day like it did for us. I want to ask you one final question. And it's a question I ask a lot of people. If you had to teach a novice cook, not a Culinary Institute student, but a novice cook, one dish, what would it be?
Well, I think about when I went off on my own after college with mother. My mother said, "Make sure you know how to make gumbo. Do not call me in the middle of the night and say, 'Oh, Mom, how long do I have to cook this?'" She said, "Please don't call me after 8 o'clock and ask me how to do something after you've had two beers or whatever." And she also made me learn how to make stuffed bell peppers with seafood or with ground beef. I knew how to bake a chicken. I knew how to bake a chicken beautifully. And I could use leftovers to make that chicken salad she always said you should learn. And I also think one-pot meals are so easy. It's not that it's not easy. They pay off. You have a big pot of something and rice and a salad, you're good to go.
Right.
Red beans and rice, jambalaya.
Yeah.
My mother used to make, I think some places they call it sticky chicken. It was like smothered chicken down. Mm-hmm. You had rice and gravy with that. You had rice and gravy with round steak. And fresh vegetables are so simple now. You can get all this stuff at the farmers markets. I mean, in Browse says all these bring all your money to Whole Foods and get the prettiest stuff you can find. But so I think people want to do something too fancy in the beginning. It has something you have to grow into. You have to polish your techniques and it also too depends on your family. I have a nephew. His wife dusts her pants, but he likes to cook. So on Sunday afternoons, it's a free for all. His brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews. If I am out and about on Sunday afternoon, I know where to go because they're cooking. And I think that's wonderful to see them do that. And I have 2 or 3 others. I have one little girl, one who's only 15 years old, and she's just hungry to learn to cook. She'll come spend a couple of hours here, and she's happy as she can be. She just likes to be around that.
And I do see that from the younger ones. It's almost like we're back on an uptick of learning. My daughter taught herself how to sew. We're seeing a huge interest in canning, jams, jellies, pickling, that sort of thing. So perhaps we're back on an upswing with home cooking. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. We are going to link to all your cookbooks in the show notes and just want to put it out there if you have any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners. We'd love to hear that.
I'll go back to what I was saying. Don't ask a relative for a recipe. Go cook it with them. Get in the kitchen. I used to laugh that we had a great aunt who's fabulous cook, and she would never tell us the whole recipe. Right before she died, Mama said, "We are going to the hospital, and she's going to tell us." And, I think that people need to be in the kitchen and watching a friend or a relative or somebody cook to watch what they do. Because sometimes I even do it, give a recipe to a child, and I forgot to tell them to do this. Do you really have to? I could follow somebody around in the kitchen and watch what they do.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, thank you.
Be proud of it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chef.
Okay,
all right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks again to Chef Marcelle Bienvenu for being on Smidgen. Let's head to the kitchen to cook Chef Marcelle's classic Cajun corn Creole. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. So we're in the cooking segment of Smidgen now, and I'm joined here with store staffer Sarah. And we're going to be cooking up a dish that comes to me by my interview that I just finished up with Marcelle Bienvenu, who's an instructor at the John Folse Culinary Institute. But this is a recipe that has been out there in the world. She was the food editor at the Times-Picayune for years. And this is a recipe that I turn to again and again for Thanksgiving, mostly, but delicious any time of the year. So are you ready to start cooking?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So let's start some cut chop before we dig into what you do for me and why we're so lucky to have you here at Red Stick Spice. Okay.
Right.
We need a chopped onion and we need some chopped bell pepper. We probably don't need all of that red and green bell pepper, but why don't you go after about half of that in a pretty small dice, and then we'll get this chopped up. So my interview that I just finished up with Marcelle Bienvenu, she was one of my instructors when I went to culinary school. And she joined the university when I was a senior, and this was around 2010. And she had a very successful career in New Orleans. She worked for Emeril Lagasse. She was the editor of the Times-Picayune. She's written many, many cookbooks. The classes I took from her at Nichols, her books were the textbook.
Oh, wow.
For the course. So I was super excited when she came on board and I was able to study with her for a year at the school. But she is a long time, very knowledgeable Cajun Creole cook, and this is one of her recipes that you and I are going to cook up.
Where is she from originally? Because Bienvenue sounds like a Cajun name.
New Iberia.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
awesome. Hometown girl.
Because you're from New Iberia.
Yes.
Okay. So she and I were talking about teachers and who we sort of tick off as our favorite teachers throughout our lives or careers. And, she's definitely one of mine. And then she told me a lot about who she saw as her teachers. But this is a perfect segue into you because, like me, your mom was a teacher.
Yes.
My mom was a kindergarten teacher. Your mom was a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah, my mom taught kindergarten for most of her career. And then when kindergarten started to be too tough, as she put it, because kindergarten is now a lot like first grade.
Yeah.
She decided she wanted to move down to pre-K. So she moved down to pre-K 3, which was kind of what kindergarten I think used to be.
Right.
A lot of playing, role playing, dress up, art, very just like learning about school, how to be at school, things like that, rather than the actual getting into reading and things like that you now do in kindergarten. So
I remember my kindergarten report card. Mm-hmm. You'll be happy to know.
I was probably like I could tie my shoes.
No,
I know my address.
Skip.
Yeah.
I could skip. I could also walk a balance beam.
Right. It's like, it was motor skills and those just life skills, things like that. And that's
plays well with others.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, that's funny. But you came to me a few months ago looking for a part-time job because you were growing a new business of your own.
Right.
But you just recently left teaching.
Yes, I sure did.
You're a master's degree teacher teaching first grade.
Yes. So, I taught for 8 years. I taught 2 years in a private school in New Iberia, a little small private school. And then I moved to back to Baton Rouge after I graduated from LSU and worked at a charter school here for 6.5 years.
Okay.
All doing first grade.
Okay. So I saw that in you a little bit last night. So you were helping me set up. We taught a class last night called Curries, Cocktails, and Cookies.
Yes. Do we need to add the onion?
Yeah. So let's get those bell peppers in there. And I'm going to crank the heat up. And I also need some fat in here. So I'm going to do our garlic extra virgin olive oil. So we need these to saute. And then we'll get the rest of the ingredients in. So we were setting up for the class last night, which
Right.
I'm so happy to have you with us.
Yeah, I love the
helping with
classes. It's
cooking
so much
classes,
fun.
and I'm glad that fits in with what you're trying to do.
Right.
But you needed the recipes in order to finish setting up the class, and so I went into my office to print the recipes,
Yes.
and I saw a squirrel, and I began filing my receipts. I cleaned my purse. And I started filing my receipts, and you walked in. And
I came in about 10 minutes later, and I was like, "Are you printing those recipes that I told you to print?" So I kept having to go remind her that I needed the recipes
which is a
printed.
little bit like first grade.
Yes. So yeah, I think the average attention span for kids, it's whatever their age is that's how many minutes.
Okay.
So for first graders,
I'm not doing too good.
Most of them are 6 years old or 7 years old, so their attention span would be 6 to 7 minutes, which is really hard when you're trying to do something that obviously everything takes longer than 6 or 7 minutes. So,
But Sarah, so now let's explain what your new business is. So you have started a professional organizing business.
yes,
So when
professional
you
organizing.
were clearly not happy that I hadn't printed the recipes, I then said, "But I'm organized."
She did. She tried to make up for it, saying she was organizing her receipts, which is great, but we needed to focus on the class for right now and get everything ready and set up for that.
And
And
that's
then-
called redirecting.
That's right.
So
That's
thank
right.
you for that.
I tried to affirm your need for organizing right then and there, but
Yeah.
we needed to do our other task first.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so let's go back to teachers.
Yes.
Who are those teachers you think about, like from your childhood? I have a 7th grade English teacher, Mrs.
Okay.
Walton, who I credit for. Prior to culinary, I studied marketing, and I worked
Right.
as a copywriter in advertising, and I love to write, and writing is like huge for what I do right now. So Mrs. Walton in 7th grade was who made me love like grammar
Right.
and writing and that sort of thing.
I would say a lot of my lower elementary school teachers really stuck with me. 'Cause
Yeah.
School was just so fun. You know, I
Yeah.
remember it just being really fun. I remember our teachers being very, almost like laid back in
Yeah.
a sense, that they would almost let us like convince them to let us do fun stuff if we got our work done.
Right.
And so I remember one of my, I think she was my 1st grade teacher. No, she was my 2nd grade teacher. We used to take walks around the neighborhood, which I feel like nowadays that would be completely, never would be able to happen in an elementary school.
How many permission slips would you have to
Exactly.
have signed?
Right. You know,
in order
and
to do that.
We'd have to have, you know, the first aid kit and the back, you know, all
Right.
that kind of stuff. But we used to just convince her to let us walk around go for a walk in the neighborhood in the afternoons. And I just remember that being just such a fun time. Because, I don't know, I guess as a kid, you're like, oh, we're breaking out of school, like kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Even though we were with our teacher, it was obviously fine.
Sure.
But, yeah, so she was one of my teachers her name was Miss Polk. She was one of my 2nd grade teachers. And she
Okay.
used to, and we also would have class outside a lot, which
Yeah.
was fun. Obviously, the teachers that let us go outside, apparently that stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember being actually very terrified of her. She was always just very, like, loud. And she never really fussed, but I think she just had a loud voice. And as a little kid, I guess that was just kind of scary.
Right.
But once I was in her class and I realized that she wasn't scary or mean or anything like that,
Right.
she ended up being one of my favorites. But yeah, she was pretty lenient on us, would let us go outside a lot and do class outside and
Yeah.
go for walks and things like that. I guess she didn't really influence me academically, but it made me love school because it was fun, you know.
But I think she influenced you a lot.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, to watch you tell that story, that's pretty cool. So you have decided that you've left teaching and you're going to start this business,
Right.
and your business is called South Coast Organizers.
Yes.
And you recently published a blog that I read and loved.
Yes, thank you.
My favorite part of the story is your first recollection of organizing.
I do. I actually, because someone asked me that question recently. And so I kind of had to sit down and think back about it because I kind of didn't remember when my first aha moment of
Right.
this is an actual skill.
Right.
But then when I sat down and really thought about it, I thought about the summers in between school. My mom was a school teacher, so she was off during the summers and she used to stay home with us. And so she always would have kind of a list of projects that we would do every summer. And one of the things we would do every summer was we would clean out the whole house. We would declutter, is what everyone's calling it now. I guess is the buzzword.
Right.
But we would declutter, and we would go through all of our clothes, and we'd go through all the closets, and we didn't have a garage, but like the shed and the attic and all these things. And I didn't know that was like different than anybody else. I thought that was just something that everyone did.
Right.
And I kind of carried that into my adulthood. Even when I was teaching first grade, I was off for the summer. I never took a summer job when I was, a lot of other teachers take summer jobs. Right. I never did. That was my time to kind of do those things for myself. Mm-hmm. And I kind of started to realize that not everyone else does that. Yeah. And not a lot of people have time for that. Nobody has summers off. Yeah.
So that was like your first,
Yeah, and so I kind of thought back to my childhood, and I remember we had this one closet that was like our holiday decorations and a lot of like crafting supplies, because we used to do a lot of like art projects and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember taking everything out of that closet and finding little containers for the beads and the ribbons and all these things, and I remember putting it back and just being like, oh, look how pretty it looks, and it all fit, and it was all neat. And I just remember, like, that making me so happy. Yeah. And then a couple years ago, I kind of did the same thing with a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. She was kind of overwhelmed. She was trying to get her house together, and I'd spent the weekend with her. And I was off for the summer, so I said, well, how about I stay another day or two, and we kind of do some organizing projects. And so we ended up working for 14 hours straight on her house.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, we started with one room, and we're like, okay, we're just going to do this room. And I'm like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And I kept just, like, going. It just gave me so much energy to because I had been wanting to clean it so bad for so long. You go to your friends' houses, and you want to clean stuff, but you don't want to overstep. Right. But, like, I was like, okay, she's letting me do it. I'm going to, like, really get this house organized. Right. And her husband was so excited when he got home. He was like, I can't believe y'all did all this in a day. So
that's
that
so
kind
awesome.
of got the ball rolling and the idea going.
And so now it's a business.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay. Yes. We've got to get moving on this dish. So what I smell is magic.
Yeah, it smells so good.
Yeah. So onion, bell pepper, a little bit of fat, nothing really bad ever happened when those came together in a cast iron skillet. So we start on the stovetop, and this moves to the oven. And Marcelle, in her original recipe, has it transferred into a casserole dish, which is fine. But we're just going to move this straight into the oven. So what we're going to do now is, these are really, really nicely browned and starting to soften and beautiful color and smell wonderful.
It smells like my childhood, basically.
Right, New Iberia. Yes. Yeah, this is what New Iberia smells
Every
like.
dish starts with onion and bell pepper.
Exactly. So we are going to get the cream corn in here, and then I need you to take this fork and very carefully beat that egg, and we're going to get that in there. We're going to get the egg in here. It's kind of when I first made it, I was like, these aren't enough ingredients to do what she's talking about, but it all works out. So
that's creamed corn that you use?
It is creamed corn, and what ends up happening is it's sort of like a corn pudding at the end. Yeah. So we've got the cream corn in there. We add the milk. Go ahead and get the egg in here, and I'll start getting that all incorporated. I don't want any corn left behind, so let's get all of that in there.
Do you usually use like full fat milk when you cook? Or?
Yeah, so this is definitely full fat milk. Okay. I could see this coming together with some half and half or cream for sure.
That would be delicious.
But it works really well with the milk. So it's super soupy right now. We're going to add cornmeal in a moment, but we need this to thicken just a bit. So go ahead and sprinkle our cornmeal in there.
Is there a difference between cornmeal and like what would be like a cornbread mix, or does that have cornmeal in it?
Cornbread mix is going to have leaveners in it. So it's going to have your baking powder or baking soda or something like that. There's probably some cornstarch in there. Making your own cornbread is a cinch, just using cornmeal. And it's all about the coarseness of the cornmeal and which one works better. So this is just a traditional, very fine ground cornmeal. This is also what you would use to make polenta.
Oh, okay.
So you go ahead and just dump it all in there. I'm going to switch to a whisk just for a second and get that all incorporated. It's starting to thicken. I can feel it pulling against my whisk. So tell me, in your brief tenure with Red Stick Spice.
Yes.
You have been, we won't say roped into, but roped into 2 photo shoots.
I feel like you're always like, oh, we're doing this tiny little thing today. Can you come by?
We're doing this tiny thing that's really weird, and I'm going to need you to get a manicure.
Right, yes.
And don't wear stripes or plaid.
Right, yeah. I get specific outfit requests.
This is photo shoot number 3 for you. But
now I get to put on my resume that I'm a hand model. I'm
there
an
you
experienced
go.
hand model.
There you go.
So I think that works out for me, in my favor.
One of my favorite things that happened so far with having you on staff was we did a karaoke cooking class.
Yeah, that was so much fun.
So let me just talk about the numerous levels of hate I got about this is not going to work. So much shade about no one's going to do that. It's going to be super awkward. I honestly can't recall having that much fun in a long period of time.
It was so much fun. And
everybody
was
talk
super
about your Backstreet Boys? Was it Backstreet Boys?
Yeah. Well, I sang several things.
Yeah.
But yeah, Backstreet Boys for sure.
Loud and proud.
Always.
And
I'm a huge Backstreet fan. I actually won tickets to go see the Backstreet Boys in September, and I'm really excited about it.
And can we just go ahead and get Tone Deaf out there for you?
Wait, which one was that?
You, just in general.
Wait,
Tone Deaf.
What's Tone Deaf? Wait, I'm losing.
You're not a great singer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I was like, what is it? Obviously, I'm definitely tone deaf on my own skills. But I am a terrible singer, 100%. But I have great stage presence.
It was wonderful.
And I have great dance moves.
It was very enjoyable.
So it makes up for my terrible voice.
Okay. So we've got a teaspoon of seasoning going in. I'm using our salt-free Cajun Creole blend. We call it the stuff. It's just all those Cajun Creole flavors without the salt. Mm-hmm. And I did put a little bit of salt in here, and I'm going to combine that. This is bubbling away and starting to thicken. And then this goes in the oven. We put a few pats of butter on the top, and then this goes in the oven to brown and cook. This happens in probably about 30 minutes. This will be cooked and browned. And then we're going to taste it in just a minute. Yeah, we're going to grab some butter for it.
So you just kind of put a few little slices of butter on top?
Yeah. Pat dot with butter. Yeah. That's like a common Cajun Creole direction.
Delicious.
Okay, so this has got to go in the oven and bake. All right, we are back. It's been 30 minutes that the corn creole's been in the oven. Mm-hmm. And so let's see what happened here. And it's called Majestic.
Yeah, it smells so good.
So gorgeous. So I'm going to serve a little bit of it up, but we need to let it cool for a minute. And I do want to talk about a couple things that transpired while we were waiting for this to bake. So first, let's get this served up. It's like a corn pudding.
Yeah, I was going to say it kind of has the consistency more of like a pudding.
Right. And with a nice crispy top. But while we were baking, the crew was getting shots of the Cajun Creole spice blend. And I said, this is our salt-free Cajun Creole spice blend, and we call it the stuff. And then they were getting close-ups of it, and they were like, oh.
It's actually called.
It's called the stuff. Yeah, it's called the stuff. So salt-free spice blends, we have tons of them in the store. It's a big help for folks who might have a diet protocol that calls for it. But also, I like them because I get to control the salt.
Right.
So and there is salt in this dish, and I just got to control it. But yeah, good Cajun Creole flavor. That's salt-free. A lot of salt-free Cajun Creole blends just go crazy with the cayenne to substitute for the salt, and that's not what this one did. So just really good flavor.
So it's not too spicy.
Right. Okay, so we're about to dig in. Let me get us a couple of spoons, and then you're going to tell me what you think.
Okay.
I'm wondering if this reminds you of home. Now, it's super hot.
And see, I'm trying to think back. I don't think my grandmother was the big cook in our family, and I don't think she ever made this. Mm-hmm. I remember more of like a corn mock shoe that she would make.
Right.
So I think as a child, I don't think I would eat it because I thought it looked gross. So but I would probably eat it now.
Mock shoe is one of my absolute favorite things. Yeah. And definitely something that if you love Cajun food, mock shoe is definitely one you should make. But this is...
Oh, that's really good.
Isn't that so crazy good?
Yes.
So...
And it's so simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I'm really liking the crust on the top.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So good. So an absolute side dish for Thanksgiving. But this would be something, my daughter who's a vegetarian, this would be something that she would definitely chow down on.
What would you cook on the side of this? So if you were to like make this as a side dish, like maybe not for Thanksgiving, if you were just doing like a Sunday dinner or something.
Oh, I would do a pork roast or pork tenderloin or chicken. I mean, just about anything.
Yeah.
I love the sweetness from the corn and then the savory from the aromatics. But like you said, it's not a ton of ingredients.
Right.
And it seems super weird when it's coming together with all that milk and egg that goes in on the stovetop.
Right.
But it's totally all there. Yeah. We did pat it with butter, do some pats of butter on the top, and that's where that beautiful GBD, that golden brown and delicious, is coming from. But yeah, super
Wait, what
simple.
did you call that? The what?
GBD, golden brown and delicious.
I love that.
It's a super technical term that everyone should know.
Yeah, I love that.
So this is fun for me because this is a great memory of Marcelle, one of my favorite teachers. And I'm so curious, what did you learn today?
So I learned, well, like I said, I've never made a corn pudding before, so I've seen, like I said, corn makshu and cornbread pudding and that kind of thing. So I actually like this better than a cornbread pudding. So I think I would make this probably before. Yeah.
So you think this could be in your repertoire?
Oh yeah, I definitely could make this for sure.
Well, Marcelle's going to be excited.
Yeah, I kind of want to meet her if she's one of my hometown New Iberia girls.
Yeah, we'll have to get her in the store. She's super
sure.
Cool. All right, that was awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Smidgen. Special thanks to Chef Marcelle Bienvenu for being on the show. You can get all the recipes for what we've prepared, plus all sorts of links to Chef Marcelle's work at redstickspice.com. Find Red Stick Spice on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to learn more about our products, classes, and subscription boxes. Just for Smidgen listeners, we have a special discount code. Type in Smidgen15 for 15% off your entire order. Smidgen is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Please subscribe and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can also go to smidgenpodcast.com to find everything about Smidgen, including show notes and links for this episode. Thanks for listening.